Queer is a word of uncertain origin that had entered the English language by the early 16th century, when it was primarily used to mean strange, odd, peculiar, or eccentric. It was often ascribed to others, rather than claimed for oneself. And by Victorian era, it was targeted specifically towards people of different sexuality. Today, it is now reclaimed by many members of the LGBT+ community. Despite knowing about people identifiable today as queer, there are very few records surviving of how these people lived, especially in Scotland. This is due to criminalization of what was considered homosexual behavior. Much of the information revolves around, mostly male, homosexual behavior and sexual practices. Examples of these cases were most likely preserved and or highlighted to pose as examples of what was meant to be as improper. It produced as a result of not seeing them as people, but as convicts, asylum patients, and a moral evil. It is why it took until 1981 for homosexuality to be decriminalized in Scotland, and until 2010 to provide the complete yet basic protections of human rights for all LGBT+ people. Here, in the Granite City, there are many stories of people who experienced both the prejudice of society to who they were and solidarity from the individuals that helped them live their lives to the fullest. LGBT+ people of all kinds were part of Aberdonian history, and they helped to shape the city through their agency and work. In the second half of the 20th century, the push for LGBT+ recognition and rights became more public and vocal than ever, including in Aberdeen. In 1967, the Sexual Offences Act removed criminal punishment of indecency with males, but this legislation only applied to England and Wales. Various groups therefore began to campaign for equal rights in Scotland, where it remained an offence until end of 1980. The primogenitor of these was the Scottish Minorities Group, or SMG, which was founded in Glasgow in 1969, and branch in Aberdeen was received 2 years later. Their first meeting took place in November 1971 with 3 elected officers of the branch, and consideration of communication with experts from Aberdeen University. In 1973, the same university was the place of GaySoc, a society to support LGBT+ students, originally to run parallel with the SMG. The society organized events such as discos, as well as protests and action events. One of the society's founders, Sandy, remembers it thusly.
Because we had also been to London on women's marches, and we'd seen the Stepney Sisters. We were into 77, weren't we? Punk music, and it was a much more open time for a lot of groups. And I think, there was that kind of radicalisation of young people on the one hand, where we were getting involved in all these marches, campaigns. And then on the other side, there was this very secret society that was hidden and seemed to be full of older men who were all mainly middle class, in the university. And we don't want to let too many people know, because we want a decent kind of approach to what we do, and we don't want to involve too many people that would cause us problems.
GaySoc at the University of Aberdeen also stepped in to provide voice for other LGBT+ groups, such as organising a space for the play organised by Gay Sweatshop Theatre Group from London, after the city cancelled their performance at the Northern Hotel. However, from its inception, GaySoc was under pressure from other forces, both student and other bodies. Fellow students regularly toned down posters and had spiteful phone calls and abuse with other society members. Despite the focus of marginalization by law placed on gay men, lesbian women were also, if not even more, politically and socially active in Aberdeen. In 1975, a women's group was found, and in the subsequent years became the Aberdeen Lesbian Group, created by some of the founders of GaySoc. It was created to advance political interests and protection of lesbian women. In this climate, 2 recorded homophobic incidents occurred in this period that received a wide press coverage. In 1977, Scotia Bar was picketed due to refusing to serve members of the Gay Liberation Group. Less successful was the picket line in front of Jeeves in 1984, now closed establishment in Rosemount.
And we were having a drink, about 8 or 10 of us, the women who'd been down. in Eve's pub, which was opposite His Majesty's Theatre, or Her Majesty's Theatre at the time. Now we did look a bit ragged because we'd been 3 days camping, and some of the girls had skinheads and a couple of tattoos maybe on their fingers, and we had the parkas on and fingerless gloves and tackety boots, and we were a bit, laughing and that, sitting in the corner. And this bar staff came up and said, "Oh no, sorry, we can't serve you." I was like, "What?" "Oh, look at her, look at the state of her." And it was like, "Look at who?" And there was the girl with the skinhead. And she was very quiet, so she didn't even really say anything. She just kind of sat, and the rest of us jumped in and says, "We've been coming here forever, what is your problem?" "Well, a big group of women like you are quite intimidating and too loud, and like women gathering together, it was a bit, so well, why are you banning us? Is it because we're gay?"
Despite a picket line that lasted several weeks, the resolution came to the landlord of the establishment, who upheld the ban on these women. These incidents did not go unnoticed by the local press. In lead-up to the change in legislation in 1980, Aberdeen's Evening Express featured quite a few articles covering the public opinion on decriminalisation of homosexuality. From late September to November that year, local people voiced their opinion through mediums like the Evening Express postbag. What seemingly started off the debate was an article by parents concerned, who seemingly paid several newspapers to feature their press release regarding how the change in legislation is going to affect their children. Similarly, the case for abolition of Section 28 was met with similar spotlight. Thank you, David, for having us here. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about the documents that we have regarding on the Section 28?
Certainly, yes. So what we have here is a collection of items relating primarily to Brian Souter, who was a prominent Scottish businessman. His campaign to keep the clause, which, as I say here, it's keep the clause 28. And so it was his attempt, because at the time the Scottish Executive were trying to repeal in Scottish legislation Section 2A from 1986 legislation about the promotion of homosexuality by local authorities, and he campaigned to stop that. And these documents are some shed light on this a little bit, including his website, and also he and perhaps others funded a ballot of a sort of independent ballot of the Scottish populace, where we're all sent a ballot form like this. And this is quite interesting. It's just a full copy of the ballot paper. And so obviously we've collected this in the material at some point in the collection, and I didn't actually know we had this until you flagged it up to me in the catalogue. I went and had a look at it, and I thought it was really quite interesting. And of course, I don't know why my predecessors collected this. Obviously, they thought it was and it is a significant piece of history.
Was this the entire thing that was the ballot paper? So it was just simply a yes or no question?
I believe so, to the best of my knowledge, yeah. So this was in 2000 when it was sent out to the populace.
And I believe that only about a third of them came valid returned, which is very interesting because it had already prepaid postage.
Oh, yeah.
And so a lot of people actually returned it empty just as a joke.
Right, yeah. I mean, it was quite controversial at the time because obviously it was not in any sense official. It was just very much a private enterprise. It was quite heavily criticised by politicians at the time, going outside the kind of political process.
In the end, the Section 28 was abolished, rendering the moral panic ineffectual, but still sent a message to the queer community. As the legislation became less and less obstructive, LGBT+ people continued and marched into the streets, with the first large-scale pride taking place in Aberdeen in 2000.
So when I was 17 or 18 and got the job to organise the first large-scale pride, it wasn't the first pride, it was the first large-scale pride, in 2003 or 4. At that point, so this was before I went to uni, so it was before I did the societies, it was before I did the rugby club. At that point I'd volunteered with the North East LGBT Forum and Face Scotland. So they'd got funding from the council to employ somebody full-time for the 3 months running up to the event to basically organise the event. And they put it out to interview. So they'd said if anybody would like to land this contract, and it was an interview process, and I remember I felt so unprepared for it. And this is a weird thing. Like, I had little to no experience, but I just went for it anyway because I was passionate about it. I was passionate about, I was full of ideas. And that's always been the thing that's driven me, I think.
Despite the fight for LGBT plus rights in this country being long and arduous, we have made significant progress. In fact, as we conclude this brief overview of LGBT plus history of Aberdeen, there is one message that we would like to stress. Do not lose hope and keep pushing. You are not alone, and in fact, you have been working on the backs of so many individuals that have brought massive change to the people under the queer umbrella. Please be that drop of rainbow that shines here in the Granite City.